And first of all, I'd like to thank you guys for all the things that you do for your students, your school district, your teachers, your administration, faculty, staff, and things that you do for your families. And I think most important is the information and the foundation that you set for your students and your community, because basically that's a reflection of what you do and where your mind's at and your character. You see that the agenda, we have a welcoming, and I'm going to do the cultural reverence this morning. And of course, we have Dustin, and then we have two presenters, Natalie and Dr. Chat. I, I had really difficult time pronouncing your last name, so I'm not even going to try. Then we have updates. The Urban Indian Center is going to give a little bit of their updates as to their services that they provide for the community. And then we're going to adjourn, and our next meeting is not until March the 15th. Again, it's the same time that we have. So welcome everybody. And I, you know, when I do when I'm offering, oftentimes when I'm offering a prayer, I usually use I burn sweet grass or cedar, sage. In this case, I have sage here that I'm going to burn. Um, so with that, I'm gonna say a few words with my prayer, and hopefully that everybody will get the gist of it. We also like to, I just like to also recognize, not recognize, but just uh, memorate, in remembrance of. Oh, there's somebody on here. Of everybody that we've known in the past. One of our colleagues that's been in the community for a long, long, long time and who participated in a lot of activities, Harry James. To pay tribute to him today, with a moment of silence, and then we'll get the prayer going. And talking about Harry James, he presented to us, a few times in the past. He was very involved with his work as a community member first, and then he became a community activist. And the work that he laid down for generations, it's affect quite a bit of people. And just a moment of silence, and then we'll get to the prayer that I like to do. Okay, thank you. He na de dish ni le ko she e kia ani shle do test ani bushes chain Hanagani ish na la kapan shi check without the nen slow and lay out so the other shish chindo. Ade Utah State Board of Education e panash nisho. Ado uh ado Orm Utah ade e shkan. Di had says an e had the dish lito le kon. A here now the dish lito kon. Father, this day we pray as our heads are bowed before thee. We thank you for this opportunity, and we're very grateful for each other and this program that we provide for our students, our children, faculty, staff, administration, the community, and those agencies that we are affiliated with. We thank you for the Title VI programs, for the learning process, the comprehension, the application process. All of this takes into account of what we do. We thank you for the preparation that we provide for our students and our families and our programs. And this preparation is very important for us because this gives us a foundation in which we fulfill our dreams of getting these students through school, through the educational process as they leave the schools in good spirits during their graduation day of remembrance. Maybe they go on to a higher ed, maybe a profession that they would choose. This preparation again is it's something that we all strive for. We meet the expectations for the families and for the community, the staff and the faculty that we have, that we we associate with, the schools that where our children are located. With this learning process, it's very important for them, and then may they seek that information that they need for themselves, for their growth. Uh, and the prayers that we do for ourselves, also for the Title VI coordinators in today's agenda, for our guest speaker, for our presenters. Maybe may they be blessed with the knowledge and the apprehension to give us a word of encouragement, a word of wisdom. And as we prepare ourselves today, we thank you for all the blessings that you have provided for us, the weather that you have given us, the moisture, the sun, and the Mother Earth that gives us the vegetation to strive on, and the air and the water and the fire that we all partake. At times that we take this for granted, but today we give tribute to that, and we thank you for this opportunity, and we thank you for these things that you provide for us. Now look upon our families, our children, our students, our faculty, our staff, our schools, and things that we say and do, these blessings. And we humbly ask in Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, we have an agenda here, and what I'm going to do is turn the time over to Dustin now. So I guess Dustin, you can take us through what you've prepared for us.
Okay, let me um I have to I guess I got a new Teams thing, and so I didn't want to share the screen with me. So it says I have to quit and reopen again. One second, guys. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if it lets me do it now.
Okay.
Um, yeah, let me see. All right. Let's see.
Yeah. There you go.
Wait, what are you guys seeing?
We
We're
see.
able to see your screen.
You see my screen? Okay, let me just share this whole thing. I was gonna no, we'll not do that one. We'll do this one. Um, so you can see my can you see is my whole screen full right now with Indian political participation?
Yes.
All right. So um, I thought we had a pretty good um, event last night at the state library. The Navajo Nation had a resource fair for the urban Indian population of the Navajo Nation that lives here in the Wasatch Front. And they had some really cool things. If you could mute your phone, it'd be awesome. And but I was really impressed at how many people came out, how many people brought children. I was impressed that the Navajo Nation president showed up and addressed people and just reminded them that he remembers, that no matter where you live, you're still members of the Navajo Nation, and that they're there to help, and they're hoping that we can get the urban Indian population can take advantage of those resources that are available here. And if you have Navajo students in your classes, that resource fair is going on until noon today, so you could go by they have different booths that may be of interest to you, may be of help to your students that you have in your classes. I wanted to talk today just a little bit about political participation of tribes, what's and nationally, and the reason why is because we have so much stuff going on today. You know, in state legislature, they may not be directly aimed at anything native or Indian tribal governments, but it does sometimes they have effects on tribes and how they can govern their people and how they can, you know, practice their sovereignty, exercise that sovereignty. So I thought this was um, a cool thing. And I also had Native parents come up to me and ask me about how can we participate in state government, you know, and how can we get our tribes involved in state government and speaking out in there and sharing their voices there. So I thought, well, this might be one to share right now, and so we'll just move forward. I start off with this quote by Chief Irving Powless Jr. All the Powlesses are Oneida or Menominee, and they all live up in by like Milwaukee. It says, "You, the federal government, have passed the law, the 1924 General Citizenship Act, that says we are citizens. We did not agree to be citizens, and we do not agree that your governments could have jurisdiction over us. We do not accept these laws. We are not citizens of the United States." I thought this was a pretty um, wild statement, you know, to make. I can see it, you know, I can see that, you know, as a sovereign nation, he should have the right to decide who his who who the chief executive or who's the spokesperson for his people is, you know, and it seems like he's irritated that he was brought into a system without his consent in that way, and so that's you know, I can see that argument. Uh, could you if your mic's on, please mute. Um,
Dusty, you muted yourself.
okay, how about now?
You're good now.
Okay. I wanted to share some things. Um, I don't know why I did that when I made these slides. Sometimes I make them, they come one at a time. I hate that. I don't need to fix that. um, and so right now, we look at tribes and what do tribes want to have happen? You know, tribes want to stand as separate and distinct sovereign nations. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that tribes do not want to enter into relationships with other governments, right? And many times they do as an exercise of sovereignty. Um, there are many tribes and many individual Indians that are members of these tribes that feel like, you know, they were forced into citizenship. Um, we can talk about gaming a little bit, and I'd be happy to do a gaming discussion with everyone just to understand it a little better. But you know, people look at gaming and the wealth that it has brought to some tribes. um, a lot of these tribes are using that wealth to hire lobbyists, right, and really get in to participate in state and federal government lobbying to get the push the things that they need to have happen. And they're a powerful lobbying force. They've helped get people elected. And we can talk about that a little more later. Um, but you know, tribes with large amounts of money that have really successful gaming operations of them, or you know, they can donate to these campaigns and they can help people move forward and get the support that they need to be elected. Um, and so some people have seen all this participation, all this money coming from some tribes to lobby different government representatives, and they said, "Hey, you know, tribes are participating so much in U.S. government. Can they really be distinct sovereign nations, or are they just members of the government? You know, doing these things?" And so that's kind of what the roadmap I'd like to follow real quick, just so you can see that. Um, First of all, I think that we need to get a little bit of background on a lot of the times what tribes are shooting for, what they're fighting for. During the civil rights movement, a lot of the especially with the American Indian movement, they sometimes overlapped or crossed paths with the mainstream national civil rights movement for African Americans, for Latino Americans, and Chicano rights and things, and they overlapped and they supported one another, but they saw them tribes still see themselves differently, right? They're they're government entities, they're political entities that existed prior to the drafting of the US Constitution. Um, and now they operate still a little outside of that Constitution. Well, as functioning tribal governments, they function almost completely out of the US Constitution, but, for jurisdictional purposes are brought in under the Indian Commerce Act. But the one when I go back to this slide here that says many feel that they were forced into U.S. citizenship, um, looking back on the civil rights movement and Indian rights movements, there was a difference. And when asked, um, they asked Vine Deloria, who was a Lakota activist, and he says, "Hey, what's the difference between the American Indian movement and the regular civil rights movement?" And he says the difference between Indians and other races is that other races are pursuing equality and acceptance and equal opportunity. He goes, and in for American Indian justice to come about, we would like people to keep their word. It's like we're looking for justice. We're not looking to be a part of an American government framework. We're probably, what he went on to say is, he's like, Native people are probably one of the only races of people in the United States who is being pushed into assimilation to become American, while other races that were coming to the United States were trying to get pushed back out of the United States. There's obstacles for Asians and Latinos and people in the early years of, and even up to today, where they're trying to get into the U.S., become citizens, but there's so many obstacles for them to do it. you know, where the African Americans during civil rights movement, they wanted to vote. They wanted to be able to shop at the same stores, have their kids go to the same schools. They wanted to be included and be a part of everything. Whereas tribes seem to be distancing themselves. They were like, hey, we're tribes. We have governments. We have our culture. Don't force this on us, right? And you can see that through even the boarding school systems, where you're not supposed to speak your language. You're not supposed to have long hair. Let's cut your hair. Let's make you less and less Indian and be more and more, quote, American, right? And that's a really big contrast between American Indians and other races, where other races are really trying to be included. Native people were being forced into inclusion, forced into assimilation, and that hasn't always been accepted by every tribe. When we say Indians are in pursuit of justice, he said, Vine Deloria defined it, he goes, justice is the right to maintain their sovereign integrity and to rest assured that their treaty and trust rights will be protected, right? He's like, let us be a government, and if we make deals with each other, please keep your word. Please uphold your end of the deal. That's all tribes were wanting at that point. So that's a big difference there. Um, there are a couple different types of 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 Indian patriotism, and throughout the United States. And I never really thought about this. I guess what they're really trying to say, there's a spectrum of patriotism for Native people within the United States. And I found a book by David Wilkins, and he through his studies, this is how he this is the spectrum he identified, and he gave them names. He titled different spots in that spectrum with these names. He said, first, there's indigenous patriotism, where Native people have a sole allegiance to their tribal nation, and it's it's differentiated by other, I mean, by what people may think. This is a positive Indian patriotism, not necessarily an anti-white patriotism, okay? But it's a positive Indian patriotism. Then you have measured separatism patriotism, where your primary allegiance is to the tribe, but you have support for the US and probably support service in armed forces. We have others that are probably anti-American patriotism um, because of their experiences, right? They may be against the U.S. It says against the United States rather than for the tribe, if that makes sense. They're they're not necessarily for their tribe, but they're very much against the United States as a supreme sovereign power. And they're it's extreme enough to where they consider it treasonous to serve in the U.S. military, which I haven't seen a whole lot of, quite honestly. I've seen more than measured separatism, patriotism out there, but that's one of the things that he's identified. He's identified environmental patriotism, right? Allegiance to all creation and not simply human society. Assimilative, assimilative patriotism. The United States is a superior power and tribal nations are subordinate, right? There's this idea that among a lot of Native people that, hey, you know what, my tribe, yeah, it has a government, but we recognize the United States superiority to us. And then there's people that say, no, we're still tribal nations, we're still sovereign when we're and though we don't exercise full sovereignty, and there's not necessarily a recognition of U.S. superior sovereignty on that. Co-optive or colonized patriotism, right? You will meet Native people that that maybe aren't enrolled or refuse to get enrolled. They probably don't see the the why for having tribal governments. They don't see the why for tribes having operating as sovereign nations, right? And then apatriotic, where people don't patriotism is just irrelevant. It's not a native concept, they would probably say, right? There's no such thing as native pride or U.S. pride. It just doesn't make any sense for native people to have that. So there's that huge spectrum there, right? That we see from very pro positive, but not necessarily anti-white, but all the way to, you know what, I don't want anything to do with my tribe, and sometimes I don't want anything to do with the U.S. either. So there's a huge spectrum there, and so when you speak to Native people and or parents or even students, they may be somewhere on this spectrum, and so it's good to fill that out and find out where they're at. Um, I'm trying to on my screen. I keep covering things up. Um, Ambivalence among the assimilators, right? Let me shoot through these. Why do people vote? Why do Native people vote? I think that one of the biggest reasons that why we should vote is it is a protection of tribal sovereignty. I think lately we can really see that it matters who's in office. It matters who's in non-tribal government office, because those people that in state government and people in the federal government levels, they have authority. They have authority to pass laws. They have authority to change rules, and we have to make sure that the right people are there to protect tribal interests. You're going to find that there are not a lot of tribal government friendly governments out there. There are not a lot of governments that want to partner with tribal governments or see tribal governments in a positive way. And and so why should you vote? You should vote to make sure that, if your tribe has important things going on in your state, make sure you have a governor and state legislators that support or at least understand enough to want to partner in some way with your tribal government and address those tribal concerns. You need the right people in there. I yet just yesterday I was speaking to one of my classes at Utah Valley University, and there we came upon a quote by John Adams, and he said that democracy is a great machine, right? It's a wonderful thing. He goes, but like any other type of government, it can fail. Because every government is subject to failing. And he goes, the reason why governments fail is because we put the wrong people in charge. He goes, you can have a great machine and a great vehicle like democracy, but if you don't have the right people pushing the buttons, if you don't have people pushing buttons they need to, or refusing to push buttons, or just pushing the wrong buttons, or turning the steering wheel the wrong way, that's what destroys governments. People do. And so to ensure a strong government and strong relationships, you have to have good people. And that's why I think we need to vote. Um, it says many groups have been withheld from voting, right? So for many years, Native people hadn't been voting, and then in 1924, they passed the General Citizenship Act, which meant all Indians were able to vote. But being legally able to vote and being allowed to vote by any particular state wasn't a guarantee. And many states, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, they fought really hard not to have tribes exercise the right to vote in state, federal, or county elections, for a lot of different reasons that we could talk about later. But most racial and ethnic groups have been victims of forced exclusion from the American social contract. But this is what I just said earlier. Indians experienced a forced inclusion, right? um, 15th Amendment granted voting rights despite racial status. That applied to everyone except Native Americans, right? And now, since 1924, they had been tribes. We've been legally able to vote, but not necessarily allowed to vote in some states. And I think we cleared all that up. The last state to allow Native people to vote was, in fact, the state of Utah in 1956. But we fixed that, so don't worry about that. As separate sovereigns, right? Citizenship Act applied to individual Indians, not Indian nations. So that's why states were denying the vote to these tribes. So one of the reasons why they denied votes to tribes was they used a constitutional ambiguity argument, and it said that Indians have not severed their tribal relationships. They haven't adopted civilization, and they're still under the guardianship of the U.S. federal government. Um, and we in the court cases that discuss these arguments against Indians having the right to vote, the Supreme Court stated they don't have to sever a tribal relationship. Like Congress and its plenary authority over Indian affairs recognize tribes and tribal members as part of sovereign governments, but still allowed and recognized Native people to operate as sovereign nations, right? And this idea of adopting civilization, what does that mean, right? How are you defining civilization? Is it through Christianity? Is it through a total? It seems like you're not asking just for us to sever your relationship with a tribal government, but you're asking Indians to sever their relationship with their culture, and the Supreme Court was not willing to support that. And being under the guardianship of the U.S. federal government, that doesn't mean uh, that tribal governments can't function on their own. They can. Being under the guardianship of the federal government just means that tribes have the federal government support when they need it. Um, Arizona actually tried to misapply their law under this argument. So sometimes in family law, an adult can be made a guardian over a child, okay, and takes care of them. Sometimes an adult is made a guardian over another adult, and that can be for a lot of different reasons. But a lot of times, an adult is a guardian over another adult when if the ward, right, in that relationship has a maybe a is not operating at full mental capacity, right? They can't make good decisions, and so they shouldn't be allowed to vote. So that was Arizona state law for adult guardianship, because they may not be of sound mind to make a good judgment call on their vote. And so Arizona said, well, look, at the federal government is guardians over the Indians because the Indians don't know how to make good decisions. So they shouldn't be allowed to vote. And that's how they interpreted it. But luckily that was overturned by the Supreme Court, and Arizona had to change its interpretation of that law. Um, there's also political and economic factors, right? Um, Again, the loyalty argument. Tribes that live on reservations don't normally pay a property tax, right? And so they're like, hey, if you want to be a part of the system, it's a pay to play here. You got to pay your taxes to vote in this place. But the reality was, the court said, well, just because they don't live on land that's taxable doesn't mean they don't spend money in the county where taxes are being paid. You can't use that as an argument to limit tribal participation in elections and state and federal elections. Then there was just straight cultural and racial discrimination about why natives weren't allowed to vote, right? Um, Even they straight up said, hey, natives are not citizens. Even though a lot of those arguments were made in the 80s and 70s, um, even though the 1924 Citizens Act passed, 50 years prior, they try to do reading and writing requirements. Even when a lot of natives that were wanted to vote were being denied to vote, they went through the boarding school system. A lot of native people back in the day could read and write better than most any other people because they were going through the boarding school system. And so they were just wrong as far as reasons to not let anybody vote. I can't tell you if more native people are Democrat than Republican. I think it's easy to make that assumption across the United States to say most uh, you know uh, brown communities or they seem to vote Democrat, but that not necessarily true with American Indian populations, which was surprising to me. They went out and did studies on reservations across the United States and interviewed people if they're Democrats or Republican, and it was about 50-50 overall. Um, and and so it's hard for people to really say, hey, these are things that we value. These are things that all Indians value. These are things that all Indians do. These are things that all Indians want. The reason why there's a 50-50 gap there is because not all Indians are the same. Not all native tribes have the same geography, have the same state relationships, have the same federal relationships, have the same access to land problems or access to cultural things. So, and depending on how Republican or how Democrat, depending on how each state Democrats or Republicans, how they do those, if Democrat and Republican were a verb, would depend on how tribes enroll, just like anyone else when it comes to being Democrat, Republican. On the state and federal levels, candidates are more likely to get an Indian vote if they have a history of pro-Indian legislation. And I can attest to that. When I was working for Navajo Nation in Legislative Council, state representatives that came into council, they the ones that were received well were the ones that had the record of helping. And I've seen boos on the council floor when state representatives came up because they didn't keep their word or they didn't keep their promises and they didn't engage with tribal governments. So if you have a good track record, you're going to get tribal support. Um, so I guess I was a little wrong. It's about 30% Democrat, 30% Republican, and about 30% um, independent. Uh, but one thing that what most tribes are realizing is that being active in state, county, and local politics, that's what's going to have the most impact on your tribe. The state, county, and local politics, those are the laws and 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 policies that affect your kids when they go to school, when you drive out onto the freeway, when you go to work, right? The type of home you can afford, things like that. Local government deserves Indian and tribal attention. And we need to vote in those because those are the laws that affect you very quickly and are immediate um, to your the life that you're going to live. Um, Voting patterns. It's hard to track. The reason why it's hard to track is because it's hard to get out there and get the information. You have to, a lot of companies that do surveys for politics, they do it all over the phone. And for a while there, not every Indian household even had a phone, let alone all Indian people having access to a phone. And so you couldn't call everyone. And then on top of that, there was no verification on, are you enrolled, type of things, right? Um, and sometimes, what we find out is that Indians in urban areas have different concerns than Indians in rural reservation areas sometimes. And so if you're not making that distinction in your surveys, it's hard to get good numbers. Again, living in remote areas, it's hard to get out there, and it's hard to get a hold of people. And it's hard to separate enrolled Indians from non-enrolled or non-Indians in polling data. I remember when the Washington Redskins uh, issue was really hard, and the New York Times said, "Oh, we did a survey, and 8 out of 10 natives don't care about what the mascot is." And so finally, someone said, "Well, how do you know they were native?" Um, and what natives were you calling? Washington D.C. natives who really like their football team, or um, are you calling reservations throughout the United States? Or how are you getting your data? That can be difficult. Even though natives, we have a very small percentage. We're a very small percentage of the U.S. We can make a difference in our vote, right? And let me tell you, this is how. These three things here, right? If Indians voted in a block, if you can get large numbers of the Indian population to vote one way, it makes a difference. Let me tell you how much difference that makes. In Arizona, Joe Biden, and I don't care if you're voting for Trump or Biden. Well, I do care, but I'm not going to tell you which way to vote. um, but Joe Biden wins Arizona by 60,000 votes. Okay, that's pretty close. And if you step back, Navajo Nation had 60,000 people voting in that state election. That made the difference, right? And I'm not saying all Navajos voted for Biden, but I'm just using their numbers. If they did, they made the difference. But what happened was 60,000 Indian votes from across the state of Arizona that put Biden over Trump. That's huge, right? So it works if Indians vote in blocks. And it works when the race is close, and it works if Indians are able to frame the vote. Okay. If you can get out there and really express why a certain person should win as and how it benefits Native people and Native communities, you can really make a difference in these things. Uh, what have I learned? What have I learned as a professor studying? What have I learned as doing this gig as Utah Division of Indian Affairs? I can tell you that tribes have fiercely loyal citizens. Okay, they are fiercely loyal to their tribal governments and the people that they voted for, and they're loyal to state representatives they voted for and federal representatives they voted for. If you have a good track of serving Native people, you have loyalty among Native people, and so look for those things. Um, Indians are becoming more interested in municipal, county, and state more than, I should say this, more than federal government. Federal government is very important. It is, especially when it comes to public lands, like in Bears Ears or in other areas around the country. But the more active you are as tribal governments, as Indian people in state and county and city governments, the more your voice is being heard, and the more tables you're at, right? The more people that hear your voice and see you express yourself, the more successful we're going to be as a Native community, as in general. The more visible we are, the more up close and face to face we are, the more successful we're going to be. I heard someone say it's hard to hate face to face, right? If we get out there and we get to know people and allow them to get to know us, we can accomplish a whole lot in state and local government. What happens as Indian participation in non-Indian government continues to escalate? Well, I think the more we participate, the louder our voice is going to be heard, and the better chance we have to partner. We talked about framing a vote a second ago, um, right here. Where that really happened was in California when they were trying to pass Indian gaming, right? Indian tribes went out there and said, this is what gaming can do for the state of California. They talked about education, they talked about roads, they talked about different types of infrastructure. Once they framed it, they were able to get gaming in California. Um, Will termination practices kick back in because tribes are sufficiently assimilated? We've talked about termination before, and tribes that were terminated were supposedly sufficiently assimilated, even though that wasn't the practice the federal government was practicing at the time. But will this make tribes? Will this cause the U.S. government to do away with tribes and tribal governments if Indians are you know, hardcore participating in federal and state elections? I don't think so. I think the more you participate, the more your voice is heard, and the more friends and partners you have, the more secure your government's going to be as a tribal government, as a sovereign nation. How will tribes respond? I hope tribes respond by getting out and voting. uh, I hope that you're watching the news. I hope that you're following what people say, and I hope that you're choosing good people. I'm going to echo Dr. Foster's comments on Harry James. That was a beautiful man, Harry James. I I never heard him speak bad about anyone. I've only heard encouraging words from him. You know, I've only seen him act uh, in in the most respectable way with everyone. But on top of that, Harry James was a worker. Harry James worked hard, and one of the things that I recognized early on with him was when he was doing that West Valley powwow. He would walk up and down streets all year long talking to people to raise money for that powwow. Not because he wanted to be a famous guy that put on a powwow, but because he believed that bringing people together made people better friends. And he had friends from every background that you could think of. And he was a wonderful and great example to all of us. And so I'm very grateful for people like him. I'm grateful for all of you here that take the time to learn a little more, to take the time to become better at what you're doing, because we all can be better. We all can be stronger, and we all can learn a little more. And I'm grateful that you're willing to take that step to ensure that your native students are successful as they can be. And I wish you a great weekend. And again, if you have Navajo students and you want to know what resources are available for them, you can swing by the state library before 12 because they're closing up by then. But thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Foster.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Dustin. Hey, I just got a comment in terms of that voting piece. That on the reservation, I think back to my grandmother, grandfather, my aunts and uncles, even us, even probably you too, Dustin. We didn't have physical addresses. It's just that we lived beside the large tree, or you live by the rock.
Yeah.
And when they make these laws and make it so difficult at times that they think that we live in streets,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't live in streets. We live by the big tree over the
Yeah.
hill. Um, and a lot of times that we do have post office box numbers.
Yeah.
They all conjugate in one place to pick up their mail and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the people who make the laws, I think, really don't understand, and uh, the vast land that we still live in,
Mm-hmm.
the vast issues that we have on the reservations. And sometimes it makes it so difficult, that to vote. But again, you get into that block, like you said,
Yeah.
and there's a lead way there, and you get everybody to vote, and that's where you get the vote that goes to the person who's like with Biden and Trump.
Yeah.
It's one of those. And then once the once the legal officials found things out like that, they start to put a little bit more pressure on we getting physical addresses. So
Yeah.
that's
Y-
just kind of that's just basically uh, kind of it's my comment. And I like the other piece that you talked about was in 1924, the Citizenship Act. That we became citizens, but we were not allowed to vote.
Yeah.
Even I think even Utah, they didn't begin to vote until 1956. That's not
Yeah.
too long ago. you know
No. No.
so
That's
it's, yeah, it's, it becomes pretty tough for everybody. So
Yeah, and you know that whole street address thing in North Dakota, they passed laws that said you can only vote if you had like a residential address, and all these tribes were like, "Oh crap, what do we do?"
yeah,
And so the tribes went out and they just started naming all their roads.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they had to issue all new tribal IDs with those
hmm,
physical addresses.
yeah,
So I mean, up there it was important. That was there was water issues in North Dakota with the Dakota Access Pipeline, and people really wanted to participate, and you could see a state actively trying to stop natives from voting by doing things like that. And
yeah,
it was wonderful that those tribes got together and just said, well, we this is important enough for us to to name some streets and to reissue these IDs to make sure we get the right people in. So that was
hmm,
encouraging.
yeah, yeah. That, and I think there's like three areas that we see. Well, that's like with the things happening in my office. you have the urban area, and then you have the urban, and you have the rural, but they never think about the remote. We do have some people that live in the remote areas that come into the rural area, you know, especially in the school system. So, and again, I don't think they really realize things like this still happen.
Yeah, I
And
mean, if you look in the comments, Lillian says, can you talk about the San Juan County Commissioners as an example? So Southern Utah, we that went all the way to the Utah Supreme Court to redraw voting district lines because the court found that, the county was actively uh, gerrymandering to make sure natives never had enough people to ever, take a majority on that three commission panel on that for the county commissioners. And the Supreme Court hired an outside group to come in and redraw those lines to make it fair. That was what, 5 years ago.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was that recent. So it still happens, and so we have to participate, to
yeah,
make sure it doesn't happen again.
yeah. Talking about participation, last year I observed Nebo School District. They took a few students up there to the Capitol and educated those lawmakers as to how that Constitution came to be. And the other piece is that having these students to participate and to see what it's like in a political process of how a bill works.
Mm-mm.
I don't know if Eileen is on. I don't think she's here today. But is there somebody from Nebo that maybe could talk a little bit more about that, a little bit more specific? Because I think they did a really, really good job. And these students were, uh, I think middle school, sixth grade, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, I believe. So
That's amazing. That's
yeah,
awesome.
it was really, it was profound to see that.
Mm-mm.
Um, so it was a reenactment, and but the thing I took away from that is that they educated the lawmakers, and the other piece is that in the process these kids are learning the how the bills are made at the young age. So that I think that was a that was a really a good thing. So anyway, that's my comments.
Right.
Any
Well, thank
comments out
you.
there? Yeah.
Dr. Foster, this
Yes.
is Annalisa Allison. I'm filling in for Eileen today.
Oh, very good.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I could just tell you a little bit more
Mhm.
about that project that we did.
Okay.
We actually spent probably about 3 months, and we taught the students about the Iroquois Confederacy and how they had a form of government in place even long before settlers came. And so we actually used the Iroquois Confederacy, their democracy versus the U.S. Constitution, and we kind of compared them back and forth. And we taught the students, like, this is what these tribes that banded together, this is was their form of government, and this is what they said, and we had the actual wording, and then we let the students actually compare it to the US Constitution,
Yeah.
and then we actually ended up putting it into a play, and
Yeah.
then we went to the courthouse and the students had their lines, and some of the students were able to dress up, and we in different costumes, just kind of depicting the different characters from the Iroquois, the peace treaty. And we actually filmed it and we put it on our YouTube as well. So if anybody ever wanted to use that, they could. We kind of edited it a little bit. It wasn't the exact presentation we did at the courthouse, but it is very similar. So we had so much fun with that project, and we felt like the kids were so empowered. Like they were able to feel confident in sharing how Native Americans contributed to the Constitution and how, and then we just kind of let them decide for themselves what they thought about it. Did they feel like, the US Constitution was copied or contributed? So we kind of let them decide what their interpretation was of it.
Yeah, very, that was very good. You guys put something together really well there. Any other comments? Well, if not, hey, thank you again, Dustin. Always an outstanding job that you do for us. And, each time I hear something that you say, this is for me, it's a good learning process. Plus that this is new information for me. So
I
thank you
appreciate it.
again, Dustin. Yeah.
Yeah, you all have a good one. Have a good
Okay.
weekend.
Thank you. Okay. Very good. Let's go to the next. I think we do have Natalie. Is Natalie on? Hey, there she is. I had an
I'm here.
opportunity to meet with Natalie a few, well, about a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And basically, you have a project going, and you wanted to share that with the Title VI coordinators as well as their contacts. And I think something that we could probably take seriously what you're doing, what your project is, because this would affect the American Indian people and the things that they see, and especially in the state of Utah. So
Mhm.
I'll give you the time and you can introduce your program, and I appreciate that. Hey, thanks again, Natalie.
Thanks, Dr. Foster. Um, Let me just get my screen going here. Can I get some affirmation that you can see my slide and hear me?
I can do, yeah, you do both. I could see it and I could
Okay,
hear you.
great, thanks. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I work for an organization called HHMI Biointeractive, and so today I want to tell you a little bit about myself and let me get my agenda up here. And the organization that I work for, and then think about how we could support or partner with you and the educators and students that you work with. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Natalie Dutrow, and I am a proud resident of Utah for the last 20 years. I have really grown to love the deserts and rivers and mountains, and this is the place that I call home. I moved here to Salt Lake City for graduate school at the University of Utah, where I studied cancer biology. After getting my PhD, I moved right into teaching high school biology and chemistry. And probably like some of you, I come from a long line of educators. There seems to be that tradition seems to be passed through families. And so for me, there really was no choice between staying in science and moving into education. I am always interested in learning something new. I worked on helping to write the Utah seed standards and was involved in that. I moved from the classroom into coaching science teachers in the Salt Lake City School District. And then just a year ago, I took this job. It's based in Washington, D.C., and I am the program lead for high school outreach at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute Biointeractive, which I'll be talking about today. But before I get into that, I am new to this group, and I'd like to know a little bit about who I'm talking to. So if you're able to answer in the chat, I'd love to know what subject area you currently teach or have taught. It might just help me as I'm going through my slides to know that information. So what subject area did you teach, if you taught, or do you currently teach? Just in the chat. Or you can unmute and let me know who my audience is. health science, health in 8th grade, Navajo language, culture, history, government. If you have a chance, pop those in there. That's really helpful to know. Programs for after school, parents, Native students at district level, social science and ESL. So great mix. A little bit of science in there, humanities. That's great. I'll try to speak to those different lenses. I am firmly in the life science lens, and so is the organization I work for. And so my hope is that what you learn today, you can take back to colleagues that that might be impacted by the things that we learned today. So I'll just start off with a little bit about the organization that I work for. The Howard Hughes Medical Institute, both a research organization and a philanthropy. They are primarily focused on funding basic research in the life sciences. And in fact, there are several labs at the University of Utah that are funded by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. If Howard Hughes sounds familiar, if you've seen the film The Aviator from a number of years ago, with Leonardo DiCaprio, that is Howard Hughes. So he was in the early days of aviation, and his fortune rolled into this philanthropy. And so while they focus on supporting research, they're dedicated to supporting life science educators and students. And Biointeractive, which is the part I work for, is the education wing of the HHMI. And we serve high school and higher ed life science educators and their students. And the two main ways that we do that are through classroom resources that are designed by us, and professional learning to go along with them. And so because HHMI is a philanthropy, everything that we do is always free to educators and students, the general public. Another really important part of my particular job is working with our group of ambassadors. So ambassadors are educators throughout the country, Canada, and Mexico who support the mission of Biointeractive. We have about 80 ambassadors in the US and Canada and another 30 in Puerto Rico and Mexico. Facilitate and design professional learning for over 1,000 educators every year all over the country. And then some of those ambassadors, along with educators and scientists, help to develop the content and pilot new resource in their classrooms with their students. So my job is to support these ambassadors in their own professional development, and then also support and coordinate the professional development that they provide for other educators. So that's a little bit about the overall organization and what I do. I want to spend some time telling you about the things that we have that maybe you could share with science educators in your buildings and districts. I mentioned that we specialize in life science teaching resources and professional learning. So I want to highlight what that looks like. Our website, which also has a version in Spanish, and many of our resources are both in Spanish and English, which is important for educators in Utah. We do have a lot of Spanish-speaking students. There's a section for classroom resources. I point out the arrow here. And there's hundreds of resources. I'm going to walk you through the big categories of things. And as I do that, I'm going to highlight things that I think may be particularly relevant to students in our area of the country, as well as a few resources that center Native American voices in science. So one thing that we do and we pride ourselves in is that we provide data from scientific research and put it in the hands of educators and students in a way that is more accessible than peer-reviewed articles, things that can be really inaccessible to the general public and to our students. And so the data activities are often paired with engaging things like short films. The one that I'm highlighting here highlights Indigenous scientists in Mexico, which I realize is far away from us. But these scientists work as part of a global effort to preserve seeds of thousands of different native varieties of maize. And one of the goals of that project is to determine which genes could help protect crops in a changing climate. So this particular resource is only a few months old, and that's what happens at Biointeractive. There's constantly new things coming up that really are at the cutting edge to help students and educators see what's happening in science right now. Another example is that educators can download free printable manipulatives, card decks and things like that that groups of students can work on. The particular resource I'm highlighting here, that we have a great variety of things, focuses on the rock pocket mouse, which is a desert-dwelling mouse. This example is in Arizona, but the same mouse comes into southern Utah. And so for our students in those areas, this is something that is right in their own environment. And it's a great example, a classic example of natural selection, which aligns with our seed standards. So educators can print out the cards, groups of students can use them. They collect data about which mice survive in different environments. And so the particular environment might be really familiar to students if you're in one of those schools or districts in southern Utah. Another giant category of things that we do are interactive labs. So these are resources that students who have access to devices in the classroom can interact with to model different kinds of things. The one I'm highlighting is also a very new resource that we realized was important during the pandemic. And so this particular one models how disease can spread. You can add vaccines, you can take away vaccines, you can add isolation, you can remove isolation, and it will model how diseases will spread under those different conditions. These things are complex. There's also educator support documents that go with them. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about again, we provide professional learning for teachers who want to use these things, but may not feel completely equipped if it's a new topic. I already mentioned one film, but I want to highlight a few others that specifically center Native American voices. This is a recent part of a series that PBS airs, but comes from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. The series is called Wild Hope. This particular film is called The Beautiful Undammed, and it tells the story of the undamming of the Elwha River in Washington and the recovery of the land that had been submerged by the reservoir. It features Native American scientists, Native American community members, and advocates who are actively working toward undamming more rivers to bring these natural habitats back into balance. And it just reminds me of what Dustin was talking about today in terms of the political activism. This is a great example to be able to share with students and inspire. Another example is also relatively recent. I think this one's maybe within the last year or so. This film's called From Ants to Grizzlies, and it has several stories in it from across the world, but one of them is a Native American biologist from the Flathead Reservation telling the story of how tribal people petitioned for over and underpasses to connect wildlife corridors. And so it's one of, like I said, several stories in the film about people around the world reconnecting fractured habitats that have been altered by humans. So many of the stories in our films highlight scientists who are not white and not male, which is the typical way our students see scientists, though I think that's starting to shift. And so because our films and resources center these other voices, it can help students find role models that they can really connect with. And that's something that I'm excited about and proud of, and that I hope is something that you can take back to people that you work with and just let them know that these are freely available and that we're always adding new things. So I also wanted to just highlight, I mentioned there's these two things we do. One is the content. That was such a brief summary of the types of materials that we offer. There's hundreds more on the website. Those resources can be dense. They're not always easy to jump right into, especially if the phenomenon is new to the educator. So the other piece of what we do is offer professional development for educators about our resources. Those opportunities can also be found on the website. This list makes it look really boring, but again, I just wanted to remember the different kinds of things to tell you about. An educator can find access to all of these by going to the website. We offer virtual synchronous evening workshops. These are live workshops with our ambassador educators. Currently, there's about 30 different offerings between January and August of each year. You can go online, find the one you're interested in, register, show up, and get professional learning about a particular resource. So maybe there's one on ants to grizzlies. That's a popular one to have PD on right now. Also online are asynchronous workshops and courses that people can do at their leisure. We also offer virtual and face-to-face workshops that are tailored to a district or other group. Their needs aligned with our resources and priorities. So we have partnerships with school districts and school systems, rural systems across the country, and we work with that group of life science teachers on whatever their specific needs are that might align with things that we can provide support with. And then the final thing that I'll plug is our online community. This is only a few months old. It's sort of like a rudimentary Facebook for life science teachers. And so it's really easy to go to the website and get verified as an educator to be a member of that online community. It provides networking. Right now, there's 5,000 other life science high school and higher ed educators on there. In there, you can join affinity groups and discussion boards for educators to really get what they need specifically for support to do the jobs that they do. So that was a lot really fast. I have a little bit more that's going to be a lot really fast. I've shared examples of resources and supports that we offer, but I really want to take a step back with you all for the broader view of what we're trying to do as an organization. And this is where ideas about how we might partner or support would come in. So the commitment from HHMI is really that we are creating opportunities for everyone to learn. And then that follows into building a workforce that fully reflects the racial, ethnic, and gender demographics of our increasingly diverse country. So I know that building a workforce starts with K-12 education. I know that in this group, other speakers come to think about what is the career pathway for our students. And if we want to see changes in the diversity of our students, then we have to help students see themselves as scientists. They need people to look up to that look like them, that come from similar backgrounds, to use those people as role models. I also know that in Utah, almost every high school student will take biology as their science class, one of their science classes. And so it feels particularly important to me that they have inspiring experiences in that particular life science classroom. We see our role at BioInteractive as empowering educators so that they can inspire those students to explore the living world around them. And maybe that inspiration has an influence on their career, or maybe it just makes them an informed citizen who cares about the world and continues to learn throughout their lifetime, can be an advocate for, like some of the stories I just shared, for preserving habitats, for rewilding places. And so some of the ways that we empower educators, I've already discussed. We make high quality, engaging resources. They're based on science, they're accessible. And they're not accessible just because they're free, but also because we provide this professional learning that goes along with them and how to effectively use them. And then how to make those classrooms accessible to and inclusive of every student. So in order to truly inspire students, we need to know who they are, and we need to be able to meet them where they are. I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure. And we need to be able to understand the knowledge and experience that they bring to the classroom and allow them to bring that to the table. And so part of what informs our work at BioInteractive are our ambassadors. They're the ones that work with students across the country. They help us think about the content we develop, the professional learning that they design and facilitate. And when I came to this role, I realized that there are some pretty significant geographic and cultural gaps in where we have ambassadors and where we have partners for professional learning. And Utah's smack dab in the middle of that. So not only are we missing this geographic region, but we also are missing partnerships with groups like yours who support Native American students and educators. And so I thought, why not start right here at home? I still live in Utah. So I had reached out to Mario Platero. Some of you may know his lovely wife was one of my colleagues when I was a teacher. And he put me in touch with Dr. Foster. And we had a chat, and he graciously invited me here. This is only the second meeting I've been to, and I've already learned so much. And so this idea of possibly partnering in some way is really exciting to me. So I have 3 ideas of how you could support our work or partner together. And then I also have a survey where I'd love to hear your ideas after this short talk as well. So the first potential way is to bring in educators from the Mountain West who know and who love our Native American students, or who are themselves Native Americans, to our ambassador community, this group of a growing group of 80, bringing their voices into this space and then taking them out to the professional development we do for educators across the country, I think could be really powerful. So we're starting our next round of training for ambassadors really soon. The training is in the form of a 3-year ambassador academy that educators do while they're teaching. It's fully funded and supported for them. And the main sort of 3 main strands are that they'll develop their identity as a leader and model science educator, transform teaching through practices that promote learner-centered classrooms, and then design and facilitate those workshops that model inclusive science teaching for people throughout the country. Applications open in a few weeks. I'll certainly send a reminder through Chuck so that you can remind people that you work with. This would be a great thing if we could have Native American educators or educators of Native American students who apply for this program to bring them into our community, to bring that voice there. The second thing is just to bring educators to our website where they can have access to the classroom resources. I don't know what kind of access people in Utah have or even know about biointeractive at this point. When they come to the website, they can register for the workshops. There's a community button that will take them to the site to become a verified educator and then have access to our learning community of those 5,000 educators. It'd be awesome if we even had a few people who work with our Native American students who want to be part of an identity group within the educator community to share experiences and learnings and ideas and support. We could connect people working with Native American students across the country that way. And then the third potential and the final way is I put into your hands. You've very briefly and rapidly heard what we're about. You know your students, you know their families, and so I'm looking to learn from you. As I mentioned, we reach a lot of educators every year. And so what I'm wondering from you is, what do you wish biology teachers knew about the Native American students and families that you support? What do you wish biology educators knew about traditional ways of understanding the world? And what questions should we be asking at Biointeractive in order to better support Native American students and their educators? So I'm going to drop this link in the chat. I would be really grateful for any input that any of you have, the time that you might take to answer some of those questions. None of them are required. You can drop a couple of ideas in and then just submit it. And finally, I'll just say a big thank you to Dr. Foster for inviting me here today. I'm here. I'm a part of the Utah community. I care deeply about science education here at especially at the high school level, because that's my experience. So the other thing that you could do is contact me directly or provide my contact information to the science educators that you work with in your schools. So with that, I'll let Dr. Foster let me know if there's time to take questions. I'm happy to do that. If we need to move on, that's just fine as well.
Well, I think questions would be appropriate. Is anybody out there in need? You have an open forum right now, so you can ask any questions. If not, I have a few that, a few comments here. Okay, my comments, you mentioned that you're working with the environment and some of the, things that are around us. For the American Indian, that their survival was with animals.
Hmm.
And some of these animals for us, they're sacred. And for some animals, they are a way of curing an ailment for a human. And oftentimes that we don't really see that. And there's certain animals of the year that we go and kill that. In certain parts of the year, we don't. And, you know, I go back to my grandmother and grandfather. Anytime they go out and they 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 kill an animal, like let's say a deer or an elk, they use every part of that animal, and every part of that animal has a meaning as far during that time was for our lifestyle to continue. You were losing that piece there. And I think that with your colleagues, we, you mentioned partnership, that partnering somebody who's an elder like that, and giving us that type of information, and oftentimes that you can't find this in in research study, or you can't find these in books. We're oral, uh, uh, we're all our history is an oral way of doing
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
And the other one is the plants. These plants around us, they cure us. um, they help us with certain parts of let me take an example with the rug. There's certain plants out there that give us the certain color, and the certain color that we use in weaving. And when the older people, they weave uh, their rug, you have that color. You have also these plants that would help with an element. Another example, my dad was a herbalist, and he knew a lot about the herbs. And I wish I'd listened to him. I, d- I didn't, I was on a different trip, you know, but he came back from the war, and then for some reason maybe it was the gift from the creator, and he started to use a lot of these herbs. And I remember at a young age that people used to come and see him for herbs. And he had this one large room. He had these little boxes. He had tagged them with names, and he used those herbs for to help people in the community. So I think these plants are, I see it the same way. Um, and now, that we're losing that, we're losing that spiritual skill, if you will, because I think this is something that um, it's a I feel that it's a dying art, because again, for me, I call it a spiritual skill, because that's the way the creator wanted it. So, but those are just my comments. But then the last piece is that you have all these coordinators, and I'm pretty sure hopefully one of these coordinators will contact you, and to try to develop that piece for their own program. Because I see that like with Jeremy, he has his Title 6 programs after school. You have parents that attend those meetings, also with parent meetings. And this is one way that you can reach out to the parents, because sometimes that the parents don't know themselves. You know, for me, with certain plants, I'm ignorant. I really don't know. For me, it's just a beautiful plant. But for another person's eye who understands that, they would say, well, this really is for this reason. So that's just kind of my comment. So hopefully someone will contact you, and then go from there. So, are there any comments out there? I know that some of you guys are really dealing with some of the grassroots stuff, especially with the plants and animals and science. And you guys are working with science, and you guys don't even know that it is science. Okay,
I
Brenda,
guess,
I know you have something there.
well, I just was thinking, we do a lot of traditional cooking within our classrooms for heritage language. And so a huge part of that is like the production of corn, and not just like, it's a particular kind of corn, the blue corn, and we have all of the different corn that we have, but it's indigenous to us as a people. And so that's used in our ceremonies, like, our puberty ceremonies and things like that. And, like some of that knowledge is shared, but some of it is just passed down from generation to generation. And it really goes back into understanding the earth and the seasons and the harvest and everything. And all of those are tied to ceremonies and songs and different things within our culture. And so that's what I was thinking about when you were giving your presentation, but how much of that do we want to share with others, that may not understand. So I think that's where we can kind of tie in that into our curriculum, because our teachers do teach a lot about that. And then the plants and there's different types of plants that we use, and partly for our food and what the benefits from that. So some of our teachers do give presentations about traditional foods and the plants and the resources that we use and how it benefits people overall. And so that's what I was thinking about, and I'm not sure exactly how much of that will be shared in the project that you're working on, but those are just some ideas.
Thanks, Brenda.
Very good.
And Dr. Foster, I really appreciate those comments. I hope that anyone will feel free to add any comments to that Google form. There's an option to leave your name if you want me to get in touch individually. But what I'm hearing from both of you is just that interplay between culture and community and science. And that's good for everyone, right? That's good for all students in terms of engagement and making things relative. And so those are things that completely align with our goals at Biointeractive. So thanks for sharing those things. And I hope the conversation continues beyond this.
Well, I'm pretty sure that hopefully, again, I hope that you'll get some, something there with your project, because a lot is out there, and a lot of things are out there, but we really don't. In sharing this information, even with your colleagues, at the professional level, like what just Brenda said, you know, you're looking at a certain plant, like the corn, in your profession, they're unaware of that, and sharing that information, now they understand that, and hopefully that could be written somewhere in the curriculum, because after this, possibly after this generation passes, we're going to lose that knowledge, so this is one way, you can keep that knowledge going, and keep that information, because a lot of this information, uh, you can't find in books. So anyway, that's any comments out there, or should I start calling on people? Okay. Oh, well, thank you, Natalie. Thank
I
you.
have
This
a
was,
comment.
oh, you bet.
Okay, it's Charlene. Hi. I have a question. Do you guys talk about the taboos of different things, like cultural taboos? Like for Navajos, we don't handle snakes, we don't dissect frogs and stuff like that. Do you guys tell the teachers about those things or anything like that? Because those are some of the cultural stuff that we tend to get down here in St. George, where we have that conflict between teachers. Sometimes they say, oh, we want our student to do this, but then the student says, no, we can't do that because of my culture. And do you have anything that might help that part of the curriculum?
We at Biointeractive, we don't have a resource like that. Those are the kinds of things that I think partnerships would be really useful for. It was really interesting in my conversation with, I think both Mario and Dr. Foster, those things were brought up in terms of like, this is life science and life science involves animals and
Yeah.
the different ways that different cultures think about and honor. And so, yeah, it has been brought to my attention. And I think those are the kinds of things that could be really valuable as resources for teachers who teach Native American students. Thanks, Charlene.
You know, Charlene, I do have some information on that. You know, I took a trip down to the red. Well, I come from the res. It was over the hill in Chinle. We went to that. Well, I guess it was a wildlife symposium, and there was, of course, all the teachers were native, and I picked up a resource book. And the resource book that I have right now that I use oftentimes is something that you're describing, is that there's do's and don'ts. And what I'll do is I'll just send it out to everybody so you'll have an idea what that looks like. And this is only for Navajos now. You know, I know that with other tribes, they do have their do's and don'ts, and they see things a little bit different. But you know, again, this was a Navajo trip and then a Navajo presentation. So I'll send it out after this is all concluded. And
All right.
Natalie, you can probably study this a little bit more, and you could probably share. And if you need some explanation, I'm pretty sure that we have Charlene, we have Brenda that could explain even more in depth. Okay. Any other comments out there? Okay. Hey, thank you again, Natalie, and hope to talk to you soon. Okay, let's move on. Dr. Chet, I don't want to try to make an attempt to say your last name. Maybe you could say your last name and introduce yourself and then your project and so on and so forth. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I also usually don't sound like this, but I've been having a sore throat for the whole of this week. So hopefully I'm on the mend towards towards the end of this week. Let me quickly work on my screen sharing. Oh. It's funny, now let me share. I'm also working on my laptop, which I usually don't, because I'm at a conference, so bear with me, please. But even if you can't share, I can still go ahead and talk about the project very briefly and then follow up with slides.
Madeline can help you out here. Madeline, are you there?
Yeah, you should be able to share. I've set it to where anybody in the group can share.
Yeah, I think it's on my
Yeah,
I think it's just on my end with like the settings. Just because this is also a new laptop and nothing's being downloaded, so I apologize. Would it be okay that I just go ahead and briefly talk about my project and follow up with slides later on?
You know, you can do that, and your slides, send it to Madeline, and Madeline will send it out to everybody, so we'll have at least it's delayed. You hear the lecture, and then you hear and then you will see the pictures later. Okay.
Take home notes, yeah, for homework.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Wonderful. So I apologize, but my name is Chatiri Aila Peruma. I go by Chad. I'm a school psychologist and a behavior analyst by training. And I completed my doctorate in 2020, and I joined the University of Utah as a postdoctoral fellow in the educational psychology department. And within the department, we have a lab that we call the UTech lab. The UTech stands for Utah's Technology in Training, Education, and Consultation Lab. And really, we do a lot of work tied to school mental health. So it can be direct services, it can be supervision of trainees who are in the mental health fields. And they provide one-on-one therapy services to students, help schools set up mental health frameworks. So a lot of the things tied to improving school mental health in Utah. We not only work with urban schools, we also work with rural schools, schools that are in the frontier regions of the state. And we have partnerships with San Juan County, South St. Pete, Emery County, Tooele. So we try to expand across the state because we do identify there's a big shortage of mental health providers, and we want to include all of these students across the state and make sure kids are receiving services, timely services, and quality services wherever they may live. So we, as a part of my work, we write grants to increase services for students, but then also grants to increase the number of mental health professionals in the field. So when I say mental health professionals, it can be school psychologists, it can be counseling psychologists, it can be school counselors, social workers, clinical mental health coordinators. So the field of mental health is broad. So one of the things we want to do is increase the number of professionals coming into the field of mental health from all over Utah. And the goal is increase the number of professionals in Utah and hope that they will stay to serve and train the future generation. So the whole purpose of me presenting today is because we have a grant, and that means we have an opportunity for high school students, for Indigenous high school students to join the mental health field. And the grant provides a training, and this is a 40-hour training that our team provides. And the training can be in person, the training can be virtual. To be inclusive and equitable, we have the virtual setup. So we can talk more, like if there are questions at the end, we can kind of talk more about what that looks like. But the training is called a registered behavior technician training. And this training, think of this training as, if in a school you have speech pathologists, who do all the front end work, but then you also have like the assistant speech pathologists who, assist the speech pathologists to do all, not really like the high end or very specialist work, but supports that role. And that's kind of like an entry for them to get into the speech pathology career and the field. So similarly, the registered behavior technician is a position that once you do complete the training and there's an exam process, after you complete that, it really gives students an entryway into the field. And they can get really good part-time jobs if, after high school, they're looking to enter the field, just to kind of experiment what's out there. And then that also kind of creates a really good pathway to get into undergraduate programs and get into graduate school, kind of depending on the different interests. So, all of that is the big picture, but there has to be some place for students to get some direction on where to start and how to start. So we think this registered behavior technician training is a really good entryway for students. The training really encompasses broad behavioral and mental health skills and knowledge. So like I said before, we do provide all of the supervision and all of the training to students. And so that way it's kind of like they've been scaffolded into obtaining this certification. So I know I spoke a lot. I'm going to pause there to see if anybody has any questions.
I got a question in terms of you mentioned that training is there a you guys do the assessment, at the end to qualify this person. Is there a pre where they prepare that student as to what they're really getting into? Because
Yes.
I see this as a really good opportunity because we may have, a couple, three students who are, they would like to investigate this, but they may be unprepared as to what's going to be at the end. So what we want to do is prepare them first before they go into the actual, I guess, the testing, if you will, or assessment. So
Yes, that's a really good question, Dr. Foster. And even though, like for example, the school recommends several students who may be interested, one of the first steps that we do is have one-on-one meetings with the students. Maybe not one time, maybe several times, just to make sure they understand the commitment and the purpose of the training, and really how useful the training will be to them down the road. Because even though the grant does provide like the examination fees and things like that, it's a time commitment on their end. So we want to make sure, we clarify all of those commitments prior to them really signing up and pursuing the training. So yes, we will walk through the process across one meeting, several meetings, just to make sure they do understand what the training is about.
the other question is that after the training, let's say they're during the school year because of their time being taken, the school, and they may not have the minutes after school, but during the summer, is there a time that you pull everybody together and this is what we're going to do? And now when we do that, is there any benefits from that? I know that a lot of these students, it's either uh, a work and job versus school, and if there's any incentives for them to go to school. And the other piece is that are there uh, residents where they can go, closer to the U of U? You have residency there instead of them traveling, from the other side of town. Sometimes transportation becomes a problem.
That is a very good question, Dr. Foster. So when we received this grant, I initially spoke to the San Juan County school district to offer this opportunity to them. And I think we spoke about similar challenges and we worked through some of those. So this training will be conducted in the summer. And the reason for choosing summer is that they can have access to like the uninterrupted training because this is a 40-hour training, and we think that it will be good for them to experience the training back to back rather than having short breaks, because of course they're like, these are high school students, they're doing so much between like the fall and the spring semester, and probably also some in the summer. So we think that having this training scheduled in the summer might allow them like uninterrupted access with with the other things that might go on. And in terms of transportation, this is something which I'm glad you asked. This is something we're willing to work with each and every school district. Some school districts may have several students who are interested in this opportunity. So we are happy to come down to the district and over the course of the week, complete the 40-hour training. I think we will have to speak with the school team about like logistics, what that looks like, because Dr. Foster, like you mentioned, transportation is a big thing. So really finding a place that works for the students' convenience. And if we can work with the school district to identify if some kiddos can be bused to this site within the district. So I know I don't have a specific answer because it really depends school to school. But for those students who have access to transport and who are willing to come to the U, we are able to accommodate that as well. So the short answer to your question is it depends school to school, but we are willing to be flexible to meet the needs of the students and the school district. And another thing that I want to mention is over the course of the week for that training, we will, so because it's a 40-hour training, it's going to be morning through afternoon, evening training, and we will be providing students breakfast, lunch, so that they don't have to worry about those as well.
That's the preparatory phase. Is that at the end of their school? I mean, at the end of the year, and then you have your training, and then we get into the summer school. I mean, the summer project is how does that work? I just uh, to be a little clear.
Yeah, so we have to work with the school district during the spring semester to find students who are interested.
Okay.
And before the end of the spring semester, that's when we consult with the students one-on-one, just to make sure that, like I mentioned, they have a good understanding of the program, the purpose, and the benefits. And we hope to start the course in the summer. So it could be, since schools go on until end of May, early June. It could be immediately after schools close, but it could be in July. We're really flexible because we do have a team of staff who can make those adjustments on their end. And also summer is a time that we do have a lot of time on our end, so that way we can, cater the needs to fit the school and the students. So ideally we'll work on recruitment in the spring semester, and then we will conduct the training in the summer semester. And students can, after they complete the training, they can choose to do the exam. Once they complete the training, maybe they'll realize that is not for them, or maybe they're not ready to take the exam at like immediately after the training, and that's okay. But we believe that we will also have a handful of students who want to take the exam immediately. So for students who do want to take the exam immediately after the training, we do have grant money to fund their application fees. So I wanted to put that out there too. If students do decide to take the exam, we can support that.
Okay. It sounds like a great opportunity. Are there any questions out there, coordinators? I think this is a great opportunity. Again, I think we've had this in the past where the door is open. We just got to open the door and walk in. Um, I mentioned this a few times, Chad, that we have presenters and they have these opportunities. And, growing up, I didn't have those opportunities. And I'm pretty sure that there are a few of them out there that had the same opportunity to progress in their education. And that was never around. But today, you have grants, you have incentives, you have opportunities like this, and there's a wide range of things that we offer our students. It's just that now we just got to walk. We got to walk through the door. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. And like one of the reasons that we submit an application to this grant is because we recognize the shortage of mental health providers and the need for more Indigenous mental health providers. Especially in our work right now, we're seeing when working with rural and frontier school districts, we have a lot of Indigenous students who need mental health supports, and the literature says that Indigenous populations don't access mental health services, and we know the reason is because they feel the cultural difference. And so in order to break that, we want to be able to increase the number of Indigenous providers, so that way there's a point of familiarity when you go to a provider. It's just like for me, I'm an Asian, and then when I see an Asian mental health therapist, I feel that immediate connection more than somebody from another race. So I think that's something we should talk about. And one of the ways we want to do that is through these trainings.
Just another comment. The pandemic, did a lot of damage to communities. And for us, the American Indian community, it especially on the reservation, it really hit. and we're trying to cope with that. We're just finally recovering. Um, but we need people that are versed in the culture of the American Indian. They have to understand that. They have to understand that piece where the culture plays a big part in this. And I think that, like I said, we're the recovery is very slow, but it's happening. But I think we need more. We need more of these professionals in that field, and um, because I think that this pandemic again, it it raised its head where uh, there was a lot of flaws in the community, and it brought out issues that we never thought of. Now we're beginning to put things together, and I think that this is not going to be the first time. I think maybe another 20, 30 years it's going to happen again with something different. You know, so this would be a great chance for everybody to get to get knowledge in that, and how to be. So anyway, that's just my comment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Foster. Yeah, even before we stop experiencing the residual effects of COVID, we're likely to experience something new. Um, and yeah, so I'm just wondering if, right off the top of like the other coordinators' minds, if there may be schools who may be interested in like exploring this opportunity for their schools. And if not, right for right now, that's
Yeah,
also
I think
okay.
it's a thinking process now. That where
Yeah,
could I
there's a
fit
lot of information shared today. I understand.
uh, yeah, so just I think
Yeah,
in due time.
right. And I'm happy to speak to individual schools as well, just to kind of talk through the process if there's any interest.
Yeah, you know.
Well, outside that, if there's nothing else, thank you so much for letting me speak to all of the coordinators. I will send my slides shortly, and that way anyone can have access to it.
Yeah, if you could send it to Madeline,
Okay.
yeah, she'll get it out. Jeremy says Moab is lucky to have mental health programs already in underground. Yeah, Moab has one of those that's close to San Juan. And I'm pretty sure
Mm-hmm.
Brenda can probably talk a little bit about this too, because she's from the San Juan School District. But well, thank you. This was very enlightening in terms of um, an offer, opportunity. You know, so hopefully,
Thank you so much.
you'll have somebody knocking on your door. Hey,
Yes, I'll
appreciate
actually
that. Hey,
put my email. I'll put my email address on the chat if anyone is interested. Thank you so much, Dr. Foster.
all right. Hey, thank you. Okay, let's move on. Updates. Do we have any updates from any coordinators? And if not, we'll get to, let me give you one update in terms of the memo that I'm writing that's going to be sent out next week. That's the permission to buy food for your activity at the end of the year. And oftentimes at the end of the year activity, it's the latter part of April and through May, because I've had 4 or 5, have invitations to attend their activity. So um, as soon as that is signed, then what I'll do is I'll send it out to everybody, and that gives you allowable time to uh, make your menu and so on and so forth. So that's one thing I wanted to do, and I think everybody so far has received the Utah grants piece, and now it's just a matter of getting that reimbursement, and that's probably going to happen according to your business is probably the latter part of May and all through June. Okay, those are the only updates I have. And I see that Clayton's on. Clayton, could you give us an update on the language in the
Yeah.
government class?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for those that are signed up. I have students that are new from different areas too, so that's cool. What I'll do is I'll package a list of names that I've got for the different coordinators so that you're aware of who's signed up from your area. And then we can kind of have both of us communicate as we go, as we teach the class, as they're working on some things. The other new class that I think I'm gonna go ahead and go forth with it is I had probably a good 5 or 6 students saying I want to take Navajo 2. And so we'll go ahead and send out a flyer and a just a syllabus to those that want to take that class. And so it will be the 2 new classes that will start on March 5th, Tuesday. And one will start at the government's class will start at 4. And then we'll add the Navajo 2, and that will be at 5:30. And we'll go from 5:30 probably close to 7 on that one. So I'll go ahead and send everybody a flyer and also a registration form so that we can get folks, students that want to. The other idea that's floating around is, and this is something that we used to do before the pandemic, where we couldn't really meet together as a group, where we've actually just had Saturdays, all day Saturdays, 4 Saturdays to teach 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. And like in March, take all 4 Saturdays in March and just do it at a high school. And we just do it at 3 locations, but there are some seniors that, for whatever reason, they did not register, but they're kind of crammed with getting things done before their graduation. And this might be an opportunity where we just say, hey, let's restart that idea of 4 Saturdays. And I'm thinking a year from now, not this coming spring,
yeah,
but a year from now, give that as an option. You can take it online, or you can take it these 4 Saturdays that we used to do. We can still use the high school, as a Jordan High School, as long as I'm working with a coordinator or somebody that can reset that time, and we can do that up there. I can come drive up. We can do all day and cover all the materials that we need to cover. And that will be just something that, if anybody's interested for next spring, let me know so we can, or just find out who's a senior and they're just strapped. Some of these seniors are like, yeah, I'm taking this and this, and I'm trying to get everything pulled into place before graduation. And they might say, but Saturdays, I can do 4 Saturdays. And so those are the ones that would be good for that. All right, I think that's it. That's
okay.
about all I wanted to share.
Yeah, I experienced that Saturdays, so,
Yeah.
Saturday school. We always had a really good group.
Yes, we did.
And I think they got a lot of information out of that because it was a face-to-face.
Yes.
And they acted out all those little scenarios that you put out for them. They got a curriculum, they got a syllabus, and the only thing we couldn't do was feed them at noon. But all the other stuff, they were all
Right.
there. That was really a good thing. And the other pieces that I thought that was really nice was that the parents brought their kids, because
Yes.
the parents were, they got involved in that process, and even some of the parents sat in those sessions. You remember
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yes.
So, and
Yeah,
they even participated too.
Yeah, the connection. I know the
yeah.
parents have gone to chapter meetings or gone down
Yeah.
to Winter Rock or
Yep.
something. They have something to share, yeah. And
Mhm.
so I call that connections. You know, we're just reconnecting.
Yep.
And so these students, some of them are way out there. Maybe they only hardly see
Yeah.
any. They're like other Navajos or something like that. But
Yeah.
they come together in one setting. They're able to connect and they're able to share. And
Yeah.
that team concept, that team presentation, makes them feel like this is nice to have a group. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking next spring we'll
Okay.
pull that
All right.
together.
That's good. But all the other information, you could send it to me or Madeline, and we'll get it
Okay.
out to all the coordinators. All right.
Agushin.
All
Piga.
right. Appreciate that. Any other uh, updates for the Title VI coordinators, or anybody want to say anything? Okay. If not, let's go to the next. Is the Urban Indian Center? That's Penelope.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Just one of my updates was partnering with Salt Lake City School District in their tutoring program, and this is something that might be an option for those who are um, included with our MOUs within the districts. So we're providing assistance for the tutoring program Tuesdays and Thursdays, and so we're also going to be um, trying to implement a teen pregnancy prevention grant for our center, but also this is an opportunity that we can also offer those services to our districts. But this is something that is more of in a next coming year. But that's something that I think that would be beneficial for parents, but also even offering the program at the community center, at the Urban Indian Center. One thing to remember is we do have youth programs after school on Tuesday evenings, but also every fourth Friday of the month we do have a teen program. It's a Native Connections program, which is for 10 to 24-year-olds. But we also prefer that um, they are able to attend every month. But they do have these activities that are free of charge for the Native youth students registered with the Urban Indian Center. Again, these are programs designed for suicide prevention, mental health awareness, but also just incorporating these programs to help the kids, especially like the parents too. It gives them a little bit of a break and an opportunity. And then one thing too is just an update regarding the Urban Indian Center clinic. We're looking to open our new clinic facility in Murray, Utah in April. And so that's something that I will stress about in upcoming months when that opening date is. And so um, we can't wait. We'll do an open house, but also it's the 50th anniversary for the Urban Indian Center. We've been established since 1974, and many of you have resided in Salt Lake or the urban area, and so I may reach out to you all in regards to stories, but we want to definitely collect some of those historical celebrations and ensure that we record our voices. So those are just some of those updates. And I know with Weber, I will be reaching out to you soon and then catching up with everyone else. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Penelope. Anybody else have a comment or you have a update for us? And if not, we'll adjourn, and the next time we'll meet is March the 15th. Boy, this second semester is really flying by, you know. Um, Preparation time for the celebration for our students, as well as preparing and keeping up with those seniors, to make sure that you guys follow up on those seniors, because some of them will always fall through the cracks, and sometimes that um, it's like this is like anything else. you know, they have a lot undermined. So just reminders. Well, if not, thank you for your attendance, your comments. We thank the presenters, and of course, we'll always thank Dustin for his presentations to bring us the professional development for our area. So in that note, thank you, and we'll see you when we see you. Okay, goodbye.